Before we begin, we want to go back live to Buenos Aires, where a shrine basically has now been assembled in front of the hotel, where poor Liam, only hours ago, suffered a very sudden and extremely violent death. It looks as if the fans... Oh, there's a fan coming up now, but it looks as if they've been moved away, doesn't it?
They've been solidly there throughout the night. As soon as the news broke, these are some earlier images, as you can see, big numbers. You know, just in shock and sharing, and you can see the age of the fans. One Direction touched so many different generations. It was one of the secrets of their success.
And they were successful for so long.
But also...
Go on.
Sorry, no, but you can tell just how moved people are, and we're going to find out, aren't we? You're about to go to...
Yes, we've got more on this on this awful death. Back live in Buenos Aires, where, as we say, that shrine has been left outside the hotel. The editor-in-chief of Buenos Aires Times, that's the English language newspaper there, James Granger, is going to give us an update. Well, hello, James. It's in the middle of the night there for you. What's the latest on this awful story?
Well, I mean, the details are coming out quite quickly. In Argentina, information tends to come out pretty quickly. But the things that we know that are confirmed, he fell from a third-floor balcony at the Casa Sur Hotel in the Palermo neighborhood. That's a very popular kind of semi-upscale neighborhood. It's not clear if the fall was accidental or intentional. But the report, the 911 call went in at about 5:04 p.m., the police said. That was reports of an aggressive man who was said to be under the influence. The emergency services arrived 7 minutes later, and within that time, Liam had fallen from the balcony and sadly died.
So the original call to the police was actually made while we think Liam was still alive?
Yes, I believe so. I mean, it was the receptionist of the hotel. So whether in that 7-minute window is potentially when everything happened. That's what the police think at the moment. The fall was about 13 to 14 meters, and he suffered what they think is a fracture at the base of the skull. So he had a little chance of survival, and he was dead when the emergency services arrived.
There seemed to be some sort of concern about behaviour, didn't there, and scuffles and you know, events leading up to that 999 call. Have you been down to the scene? We've been looking at some of the images of people arriving in shock. I don't know whether you've spoken to any of them and talked to people there.
Sure, we've had reporters on the ground since around 6 p.m. Talking to fans there. You know, a lot of them in their 20s. These are people who grew up with One Direction. You know, they're absolutely devastated. But I think, you know, you said it in the introduction a little bit. It's shock, overwhelmingly it's shock over the death of someone so young. He had obviously spoken previously publicly about receiving treatment for alcohol abuse. And again, like I say, it's unclear how the fall happened. And that's what the autopsy will try and determine now, as well as the investigators as they look into this fully. But yes, sadly, there are already a lot of details leaking out. This is quite common in Argentina when investigations are ongoing. And, you know, it's perhaps not the right moment to talk about those at the moment, but, you know, this looks like a really sad tale and people are really devastated. The people that we spoke to...
Do we know, was there a balcony outside the hotel window? Do we know if there was a balcony extension?
No, it's a balcony inside, so that he fell into the internal courtyard, which, is a fall of about 13 or 14 meters. That's what the head of the local emergency services said. It's about 5 meters away from a pool. It's not a large area particularly. But it's unclear. The circumstances of that are unclear. But yes, when the report was made to the authorities, it was in terms of there was some reports of aggression previously, and that's why they were initially called. They weren't called, you know, for the potential death of someone.
Yeah. It's he'd been tweeting and on the social media talking about enjoying his time there and being on holiday there, hadn't he? I'm sure you've been following that. And also, Richard mentioned he'd been talking about being very proud because he'd been open about issues with drugs and other substances as well, that he'd been clean for 100 days.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that I'm an expert on Liam Payne particularly, but I would say that the images that he shared today that he uploaded to social media look like they're from an estancia, which would be out in Buenos Aires province. So that's a little bit further out, not from the city they wouldn't have been from today. He arrived in the country, I think, on September the 30th, I think, with his girlfriend. And he saw his bandmate, Niall Horan, at a concert in Buenos Aires on October the 2nd. And that was at the same venue where Liam was due to have played a month ago, but he cancelled that due to health issues. But it's not the first time that he's been to Argentina. Like many artists, like lots of people enjoy coming here, I think, because they can get away perhaps with a lower profile. It's a very nice country to visit, you know, and he'd been here a few times before. So it's, it's just very sad, I think. Yeah.
All right, James, thank you very much for your time this morning. We may come back to you later in the programme as things develop there. Thank you very much. Let's come back now to Jonathan and Kwasi. And, of course, there's so many tragic aspects to this story. One of them, of course, is he's got a little boy by Cheryl, who he was married to for a number of years until they divorced a while ago. I think the little boy's about 7 or 8 years old now. Bear, he's called.
Yeah.
That's another horrible aspect.
I think that affected me deeply. I mean, I've got a 3-year-old daughter, and anyone who's got a small child can... You know, you can imagine the horror of them losing you or their other parent. I'm not an expert on his music, as James said, but I knew that I knew about him. I knew that he'd had a relationship with Cheryl Cole. I knew they had a son. I think, as you said, he's 7. And I think the fact that he was 31 at a very young age, you know, by modern standards, certainly.
Musically,
and
we would...
7, the son is 7. I think that's terrible.
Yeah, well, it's obviously terrible, isn't it? It's terrible, and interestingly, we haven't heard from Simon Cowell or any of the other band members. I'm sure they're in the moment trying to, particularly Cheryl, deal with her son and...
There'll be the shock.
And all the things that come with it. But for many people, they were a band that everybody had heard of. Liam had been successful as a solo artist as well. Harry Styles' solo career is sort of so off the scale successful that you forget actually the other individuals and his own individual success. And it's just something that I think everybody will be feeling this morning.
Oh, absolutely. It's shocking news, and people will feel for his family, for his child, for his friends. But also, I think many people will be waking up thinking this is a story which we've heard so many times with so many different rock stars. People become very famous at a very early age and then get sucked into a life of excess, and it ends in the most desperate and tragic of circumstances. It's really, really sad.
We were saying earlier, we were reflecting on this, that particularly when they find stardom so very, very young. And it takes off so quickly. There's no time to adapt. I mean, for example, you look at a group like the Beatles, who came up kind of the slow way. I mean, they were working in the cavern nightclub, they were working in the pubs. They gradually found their success. Then they had their breakthrough single hits and all the rest of it. But they were basically a working band in Liverpool for quite a while. With these TV talent shows that we have today, it's very different. You have a bunch of completely unknown, usually teenagers, who kapow, suddenly, within
a week, you're right,
are global figures, you know.
But there have been issues with very, very young pop stars and various demons, and we don't know enough about the circumstances of Liam's death.
No, we don't.
No.
But he was very open. I think it was good that he was very open about his addictions and the issues he had.
Absolutely. And, you know, One Direction had 2 #1 albums, a #2 album. He's had success. I mean, musically, they're a big force. Lots of you at home wanting to share your feelings this morning. Masabanda says, I'm absolutely heartbroken. He's a Wolverhampton boy and took up boxing at my late husband's gym when he was being bullied at school. My husband always called him Little Payne. When he became famous with One Direction, he never forgot his roots and donated boxing kits to his former boxing club. May he rest in peace. I mean, you know, there's a whole world, as with any loss of life, of fingers of people that feel the loss, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, look, we're going to be talking to people who knew him pretty well, including our own showbiz reporter, Charlotte, who did a TV series with him. Scarlett, I'm so sorry, Scarlett, who did a TV series with him quite recently.
And Socrates as well.
Yeah, that's right.
They performed.
And has a very fond set of memories of him, and others who'll be joining us as we go through the programme, who did know him and worked with him and can reflect on what everybody is saying, that whatever his issues might have been, which hounded him,
and we can
he was a lovely guy.
Celebrate his life whilst also feeling for his family, can't we? Should we talk some politics?
Yeah. Migration.
Why not?
Why not?
Migration.
Not sure it'll necessarily lift our spirits, but we'll talk some politics.
Well, it looks as if the EU is moving towards some kind of unified policy of Rwanda by another name.
Sure.
Basically getting these foreign-based hubs where asylum seekers can be sent, Albania, for example, which is what Italy is doing, to be for all the time it takes to process their claims. It's, as I say, Rwanda Mark II, is it not?
I think it looks like it. And I think the issue that whether it's Rwanda or Albania, it's a third country where you can process and deal with the application. The issue that we've had is that people come here and expect to be dealt with here, and that in a way exacerbates the problem, because once they're here, they can in many cases, they disappear. Whereas if you deal with people in a third country, I think it's A, a deterrent, and B, you're more likely to get the process effectively done. And it's no accident that Germany, Italy, you mentioned, and other countries are looking at having a third country, processing the application.
What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, let's see what is actually proposed today. I mean, I think it was the right thing that the Labour government got rid of the Rwanda scheme. It was an expensive flop. It wasn't going to work.
It was never tried.
It was only ever going to deal with 1% of asylum seekers. And the right thing to do is properly process people's applications, and then people who have a right to stay here when their application has been processed, they should be allowed to stay and get on with their lives. And people who don't have a right to stay here, you should return them to their country.
But having spent the money and got the infrastructure there, is it better to go with it now or carry on exploring other things like Albania?
I think the third country, so there's an issue here. Do you process the asylum seekers in your country, or do you take a third country between the country of origin of the asylum seekers and where they want to get to use the third country to process it? And I think the consensus is moving away from dealing with asylum seekers in the country that they're aiming to go to, towards a third country. And Italy are doing that with Albania. The Germans have said they've actually praised the Rwanda scheme, of all things. And that's what people are going to do.
But remember, the Conservative government's Rwanda scheme was just for 1%. And then everybody else was effectively left in limbo. Their application never, ever processed, effectively left in limbo in hotels and other accommodation, costing the taxpayer billions, where it's surely a better system to properly process people. And if they do have a legitimate asylum claim, let them get on, let them get on in society, contribute to society, get a job, and so on. And if they don't have a legitimate claim, return them to that.
So the issue with that was that the third country, there was evidence, and I think people are agreeing with that in Europe, that it acted as some kind of deterrent. If you're saying, OK, we're just going to take ages to process the documents here in Britain, that's not an incentive to stay away.
Yeah.
You're actually going to come here and you're going to take
Do you know what always
chances?
struck me about the whole Rwanda thing? When I very first heard it some years ago, I don't know if you'd agree with this as a former our political reporter here, Rani, but we live in an age which I don't think has ever been quite as intense politically as far as perception goes.
Yeah.
Perception increasingly comes to the fore. And the moment you said Rwanda, you had a perception problem, because people's association with Rwanda was with mass slaughter and carnage and a total breakdown. Now, that's not the country that it is today, but that was the message that it sent. Yeah. And I wonder if that was the intention, actually.
So I think the intention, I mean, I was in cabinet, I think, when the scheme was developed. The intention was to say to the asylum seekers, this is serious. You're going to have to go to a third country, you will be processed there, and then once processed, you may or may not be able to come to Britain. And I think that was very much the intent. It was a signalling thing, but that was the whole point. The whole point was to give some kind of deterrent. And there's evidence that actually the deterrent was working, because people were saying that they were going...
It's not a deterrent if it's only 1% of
was,
total cases.
No,
and actually, what would happen is people would be sent, or the 1% of them would be sent to Rwanda, and that was it, whether their asylum claims were legitimate or not. You'd be in Rwanda
You talk about 1%, but the people in Calais certainly knew about the Rwanda scheme. The asylum seekers who are now in Calais.
So you feel the message got out there, but whether it stopped them, I guess, I
think the message was... We won't know.
We're going to be
debating was shelved
this a little bit later.
after the election.
Well, if it's only 1%, I think that's pretty good odds for the people smugglers, isn't it?
But the signalling was very powerful.
Okay.
Right. Should we talk budget as we hurtle our way or drag our way to the 30th? Lots of stories on the front page. Rachel Reeves accused over bogus £40 billion black hole. Apparently it's not as big. It's all exaggerated to cover up changes. We've also got the Mail saying that the decision, we don't know if it's a decision, do we, but the kind of floating of the idea of employers' national insurance rates going up will be Labour's poll tax. Will we have riots on the streets like we did back then? And also capital gains tax is likely to go up on shares and assets, but not interestingly, the latest rumour is, homes, second homes and sale of those. What do you make of these stories?
Well, look, I mean, obviously I was involved in the budget. It didn't work out. I'm sure Jonathan will remind me of that. But what we were trying to do was reduce the tax burden, and we probably did it too fast. I put my hands up. What is happening now is the opposite.
Good use of the word probably, I would say.
I mean, you can gloss it how you want.
Yeah.
But it was clear what I was trying to do, what we were trying to do. I think
so. What is she getting wrong?
So
is some of this too big and too fast?
So basically, it's the opposite. So what's happened is that the OBR will score the budget. They've said that given the amount of money you're spending as a government, you will need to raise money somehow. You either borrow the money or raise it through tax. And they've obviously gone for we're going to raise it through tax. All these stories are about tax.
What do you think, Jonathan?
Well, I mean, don't worry. I'm not going to remind you of your budget. I'm not going to go for the obvious cheap shot there. Don't worry about that.
But what do you make of this summation in the front of the Telegraph?
Yeah.
Budget to be the biggest tax raiser in history. If that's true, then what is the point of a manifesto before an election?
Well, I mean, look, there's always these rumours swirl around before a budget, and the budget is on October 30th, so we're going to have another 2 weeks of speculation, of newspapers saying this tax is going to go up, or this programme over there is going to be cut back.
You can hear some themes coming through, though, can't you?
Yeah, no one said that the taxes are going down. I mean, all the stories are about tax.
And no one's talking about income tax, for instance.
Well, look, I mean, the government feel that they have inherited a hole in the public finances,
Apparently not 40 billion, though.
A problem with the public finances. Some of it, by the way, is because of the hotel bills, because of the failure to process asylum claims, actually. Billions being spent on hotel bills because of the failure to process asylum claims. The government have tied themselves down on income tax, national insurance for employees, VAT and corporation tax. So there's bound to be speculation on some of these other tax rates.
What do you think about the Daily Mail's claim that these projected rise in employers' contributions to national insurance is going to be Labour's poll tax? I personally think that's a stretch too far.
I don't think that's going to be the case, but I think, and also you've got to understand that a lot of the leaks, a lot of the information, the noise, is spread from within the government because they're flying kites. Yeah. And I remember that happening, years
You do
ago.
that, don't you?
When Philip
make
Hammond,
calls, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I was his bag carrier and we put things out there.
It does feel like dancing on the head of a pin, doesn't it, to say we're not putting our national insurance up other than for employees. Most people are going to think they said they weren't going to and they are.
Well, I mean, funnily enough, I was in the room for these discussions on the Labour manifesto. And the Labour manifesto, which I helped pull together, said we will not increase tax on working people, and then it referred to income tax and national insurance and VAT. The Tories in the election campaign actually said, Labour are not ruling out an increase on national insurance for employers, right? That was the Tory attack against us. And we had a discussion internally, because I was the person going around the studios virtually every day.
Sure.
To my detriment, actually, it turned out. It should have been in my Leicester constituency, but that's another story, right? But we were never going to rule that out, that one, because we were talking about working people, employees, and their income tax.
So just briefly, because we're out of time, so I want to squeeze this in. Just to finish with, there's a big petition being delivered to Number 10 today, calling for the complete ban on greyhound racing.
Yes.
And I know that you used to go to the
Well, I've been a couple of times. Yeah. I mean, it was probably more than 20 years ago.
Just when you were a youngster?
Yeah, I'm sort of in my 20s.
I'm not seeking to pursue you about it. I just want to know what you think.
The issue, it was quite sort of I wouldn't say fashionable, but it had a vogue.
It did have a cool moment. I remember it became a thing to do.
It was a thing, you know, with the Guy Ritchie and people like Prince Edward.
Well, a lot of dogs die during the races.
So obviously there's a humanitarian or you know, anti-cruelty to animals aspect.
Yep.
But again, I think, you know, to say that you're going to ban something because of cruelty to animals, you should look at the cruelty to animals. You should try and improve the conditions of the dogs, as opposed to banning the sport entirely.
Well,
that's my view.
I've never been, don't know anything about greyhound racing, but my instinct is not to ban things. And where do we go next? I know people always raise concerns about the Grand National and whether we should ban the Grand National.
There's always a call every year for that to be banned.
But I know nothing about greyhound racing, but I'm going to go off and read up on it now.
I love the fact that you talk about greyhound racing, budget and the and everything in between, and are open about
He's a politician. He's a very good politician.
Well, good to speak to both of you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.
See you, mate.